And in this hotel room that we're broadcasting from here at the Sheraton Four Points in Orlando, where we're doing a seminar with Richard Bandler and John and Kathleen Laval on Neuro-Linguistic Programming, is Scott Carter, who is a friend of the show. He's been on the program before. Scott, in his day job, is working as the executive producer of the Bill Maher Show, and he's also a playwright who has a play that has played in how many cities now?
19.
19 cities around the country, and the name of the play is?
The Gospel According to Thomas Jefferson, Charles Dickens, and Count Leo Tolstoy, Discord, and people call it Discord.
Yeah, and it's brilliant, and you're working on a new play too.
Thank you. I've got a new play also. Yeah.
So what caused you to think, hey, I ought to go to Orlando, fly across the country, and learn about neuro-linguistic programming from this guy that some people say is like a madman?
Madmen do not turn me off. Madmen test my own thoughts, and I often find myself seeking things that are outside of my comfort zone. And on Real Time, we do 35 new shows a year. So it means we have a break in the summer, and this year it's July, and then we have a break between around Thanksgiving to around Inauguration Day, January 20th, which is also Bill Maher's birthday. And so often I will take a leap into something I don't know about at all that's going to challenge my preconceptions about me, and then hopefully it will give me something of lasting value that I'm going to come back to the office with when we next resume taping, or when I'm working on a new play, and it's going to give me some additional skills both in my work and in my life.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, a lot of continual growing throughout our lives. I mean,
and all of these don't need to be successful for you to have felt good about doing it. So, for instance, when the Beatles went to India, John Lennon was turned off by the Maharishi eventually, and the song Sexy Sadie originally was going to be Maharishi, what have you done? You've made a fool of everyone. And then he chickened out on the White Album and turned it into Sexy Sadie. But it was still a good thing to do. And he later, before he was shot and killed, said he thought that he had been too hard on the Maharishi. And of course, meditation has been something that's continued for George for the rest of his life, and actually Paul and Ringo still do it.
Well, let's talk about you.
Okay.
So you're here doing this workshop.
Yeah, and we should note that it's a 9-day workshop, and we are midway through day 4, so I'm not quite halfway yet.
All right. So we've got about, I don't know, maybe 8 minutes here. What are you learning? What do you think?
I wouldn't even maybe use the word learning yet. What I'm being exposed to is a number of different ways to both perceive how people communicate and how corporations communicate with us, and sometimes the embedded language they use by which to get us to buy their product or do what they want or vote for them. So it's things that are coming from the outside world to me. And then what I'm also learning for my consideration are techniques by which I may communicate better with other people. So it's both those things. It's from me out and it's from the world in. And I find some of these things, particularly after a night's sleep, after listening to these things all day, I'll find some of them really sticking to me. Like there was one phrase, I think from the first day, of brain grammar, which is something I never thought about, and then wrote it down, and that's one of the things I thought about. Another thing that stuck with me is when people try to help other people who haven't necessarily expressed a desire to be helped, one of the phrases they use is, well, you're driving your ambulance again, and I am a veteran driver of an ambulance, and try to tell myself it's something that I should stop doing.
Yeah, great stuff. So how would you describe NLP?
I would describe it as an attempt, and I'm saying attempt now because I'm not all the way through this, but I would say it's an attempt to discover the infrastructure of how the mind works, that we might better navigate our interactions with others to be communicating what we want and have a better chance of getting it. And also to be understanding more what people want from us.
Yeah. at least more than one person in the workshop has commented that Donald Trump, whether he's doing it consciously or unconsciously, and certainly many of the people around him, are using some of these techniques of persuasion. It's kind of the dark side of the force, I guess, but persuasion is persuasion. I'm curious your thoughts on the Supreme Court nominee, on the current state of politics, and if you can tie that back into at least some of the things that you've learned here.
Well, there's a quote from the end of War and Peace where Tolstoy has Pierre, the character that's based on himself, say, at the end of the day, all great matters are very simple, and if bad men can work together to accomplish their ends, then good men must work together also. And one of the things that I've been aware of from you and from others is that there is a knowledge of these techniques that has been mastered by people on the political right for decades now, and one cannot, even if one disagrees with these people, one cannot deny their success in owning at this point the White House, the Supreme Court, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and a lot of state houses. Majority of state houses, and also they have made great inroads into universities. And so if people with whom you disagree are using successful techniques that you are not aware of, doesn't that mean that you should become aware of them if you wish to fight them in the marketplace of ideas?
Well, this is why I wrote Cracking the Code back in 2008 for the and just in time for the 2008 election. I wanted Democratic politicians, and I gave it to a bunch of them. I'm convinced nobody read it, or not nobody, but some, you've read that book. In fact, I think you told me you liked it so much you started giving. You said you gave.
I have bought it for others.
You gave a copy to Sarah Silverman or something.
Yes, and it's interesting you say that because when I started producing Politically Incorrect before Real Time, and after about 2 years of having conservative politicians and conservative pundits and journalists, and then also having a lot of liberal celebrities and politicians on, I became aware, and this was in 1993. Bill and I started working the week that Bill Clinton was inaugurated for the first time, so it's January of 1993. And I became aware that people on the right were so much more willing to do the grunt work to advance their own cause. And one of the generalizations I had after a season or two was that liberals were more convinced that they were morally righteous and did not have to have their facts straight. So, for instance, in these days, and that was before Fox News, it was before the internet, before MSNBC, a lot of conservatives we had on were doing things like writing newsletters and sending out 2 pages or 4 pages at a time.
Viggory's whole thing.
Richard Viguerie, Paul Weyrith, Emmett Terrell, American Spectator, a lot of these. So they weren't looking at this to be something glamorous, or it wasn't even necessarily something that was bringing them a lot of money. It was, they were so committed to these ideas that they were willing to work day and night for them and train a lot of other people who were following in their footsteps. And now, of course, with the proliferation on the right of talk radio, of Fox News, and of all sorts of websites, there are many more ways for these people to get out that message. And I feel like there are people who and one more thing, which is after doing 25 years of shows with Bill, where we've had as many conservatives on the program as liberals, almost as much, maybe 40% conservative. A lot of them are my friends. A lot of them are people I really enjoy talking to afterwards, though I may not agree with them. And I appreciate when they can be, first of all, changing my mind. I really appreciate that. But also I appreciate when they've just challenged me to be strong about the ideas that I've had for a long time and maybe haven't dusted off the supporting ideas by which I've held these ideas. Mm-hmm. And so I've come to have this begrudging admiration, but I also think it's like when I was in high school, I was a debater. Well, to be in debate, you had to learn rhetoric, you had to learn logic, you had to be willing to do work in evidence. And if the team you were opposing did a better job than you did, they would win the debate and you would lose, even if you were on what you considered to be the right side. Mm-hmm. So being right isn't enough, and especially in a democracy, where the job of someone who wants to gain elective office is to persuade enough people to come to the ballot box and vote for him or her, you have to learn to be persuasive.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the things that you're learning here.
It's interesting. I feel like of the things I've heard so far, they're falling into three categories. One is things I already knew that I maybe got to intuitively just from doing talk shows for 25, 30 years. Second are things I don't know yet that I'm really interested in working out to see if I do think they're true and I will keep. And then some things that I may not keep at all.
Yeah, yeah, it's remarkable. Yeah, Richard just dropped by. Richard, you're not going to need the IFB. It's fine. You know, we're hitting a break here. Scott, stick around. We'll be right back. We're also going to check in with the news in about 4 minutes, and then at the top of the hour, in 20 minutes, I have a real special treat for you. The whole next hour is going to be with Dr. Richard Bandler. Stick around. We'll be right back. Yeah, the IFB.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back with Scott Carter. Stick around. And from John and Kathleen. And talk to me about hypnosis. That's, kind of at the core of what, some of the stuff that you got excited about.
I'm very excited about it because I do believe in the subconscious and the power of the subconscious. And I haven't really, it's one of these things that has always interested me, or it's interested me for 2 or 3 decades. One of the reasons it interests me is because Charles Dickens was a mesmerist. And Charles Dickens learned hypnotism from a protege of Mesmer's. And when he would do live performances, and he did over 300 live performances of readings from his works, and his original ambition had been to be an actor, and he got an audition at one of the leading theaters in London, and the day of the audition he had a bad cold and did not show up, and so he became an author. But when he would do these live performances, he would keep the gas lights up in the auditorium because he wanted to be able to make eye contact with every person in the audience. And a lot of people thought that he kind of went into a trance, and a lot of people blame his early death on a reading that he did over and over. It was one of his favorites. Christmas Carol was the favorite, but the second favorite was the scene from Oliver Twist of Bill Sikes killing Nancy, strangling her. And he would do it with such aggression that even when his health was beginning to fail, he wouldn't pull back at all, and he would have to have doctors attending him after he got off stage, and they would be measuring his pulse before the reading started and after the reading started. But he knew no other way but to go full force. Yeah. And so I've often thought of learning hypnosis as a way to get a better insight into Dickens.
I can tell you personally, when I speak, I put myself in a teaching trance, and one of my goals right away is to put my audience into a learning trance. Right? And
well, maybe by day 9, I will have that skill that I do not have now. And you have talked about there, and Richard has written about there are 4 different stages of learning, and I feel like I'm in the second stage, which is. Do you want to explain what those 4 are?
Sure. You start out not knowing what you don't know. You're unconsciously incompetent. Then you figure out, hey, there's stuff I don't know. You become consciously incompetent.
That's where I am.
You still don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Then you learn how to do it. It's like riding the bicycle, but you're still jiggling the wheels. So now you're consciously competent, but you're having to attend to it. And then when you're finally there, you're unconsciously competent. And like the way we drive a car, you can drive a car and talk to somebody at the same time. So yeah, back to you.
Right. So we'll see how long it takes me to get there. But I'm not there yet. But I'm in the place of openness, and if there's been maybe a primary lesson in my life over the last 20 or 30 years, it's been submitting myself to an uncomfortableness whereby I might learn something new and stop defending everything that I've been so certain of up until that moment. So I've done a lot of work with shamans. I've done different workshops for We both have taken Robert McKee's story course. I've taken other courses. I now am very comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's a good thing.
I think it's the way you keep growing throughout your life, and I think it's maybe the way that we were designed to keep going. And I never want to fossilize. I want to keep evolving.
There you go. Okay, we're hitting the break. Scott Carter, old friend of the show, executive producer of the Bill Maher Show.
First in studio guest in Portland.
Indeed, you were. Thanks so much for being with us.